All right, so I want to start a new series called Bottle Basics, where we're going to look at basic things that you'll find on any bottle of whiskey or tequila or whatever. And we're going to use, obviously, some of the Altamar brands as a way of going through this. But to kind of start, I figured what better to start with than our multi-award winning Kentucky Straight Bourbon from High and Wicked. Now, when you look at this bottle and this label, the capsule, the front label, or what we then call down here below, this is the bikini label. And that is a term that's used by our design agency, Watermark, which just kind of makes sense. It's the lower bikini label. Some things of note, right? You'll always find, of course, the ABV on the label. Here we've got 52% alcohol by volume. That's 104 proof. We're legally allowed to put that on there, as well as the size of the package itself, 750 milliliters. Pretty much a standard here in the United States. Now on the capsule, you'll notice two key things. There's high rye and there's sweet mash. These terms actually do mean something. Now, 90% of the bourbon on the United States market today is sour mash whiskey. However, this is a sweet mash, meaning the mash itself, the ferment, is not acidified. Typically, you would acidify a mash to create consistency and flavor, as well as so that you can basically help eliminate some bacterial propagation. Now, the reason, if you're going to do that for consistency as well as for reducing bacterial propagation, that sounds like a good thing. So why would you want to use a sweet mash and not a sour mash? One reason is flavor. This particular mash bill in a sour mash comes off much more spice forward. It's already a very spicy mash bill. And in fact, that's where the high rye comes in as well. This has 39% rye in the mash bill, 51% corn, which is legally required by the United States to be called bourbon. It has to be at least 51% corn, but 39% rye is very high rye content in a mash bill. Traditionally, you might see bourbons purporting as high rye if they've got even more than 20% rye in their mash bill. So at 39%, this is one of the highest rye content mash bills I've ever encountered. I used to say it was the highest until recently. I did come across one that was slightly higher. That being said, this is still extremely high rye content. Otherwise, the other things to look for is aged 5 years. If that language does not appear in that way, and just the number 5, for example, appears on the label, that doesn't necessarily mean that that is a real age statement. If it states aged 5 years or 5 years aged, then that is a real age statement, meaning that the minimum amount of time that this spent, the whiskey spent in an oak cask, in this case a new charred, seasoned, new medium toast, number 4 char white oak barrel sourced from Missouri, was a minimum of 5 years. And that aging definitely helps to extract not only color, obviously, but also then the flavor and character of the oak itself. Now, when I said it was a new, seasoned, medium toast, number 4 char, all of those things are really important. New, meaning it is an unused barrel. This is the first time it's been used, which is also required by law to be bourbon. Seasoned, meaning that that barrel, the wood staves themselves, before they were constructed into a barrel, sat outdoors for between 2 to 3 years, allowing the rain, the snow, the weather, the heat to basically extract some of the tannin content that helps substantially develop more unique complexity and softens the woods quite a bit in the sense of softening the character that it imparts to the whiskey. And then when I say that it is number 4 char, or that it was medium toast, that means that the oak staves themselves were lightly toasted to a medium level, where it's applying a little bit of heat that's allowing that heat to penetrate down and start to break down some of the lignin content of the wood itself, thereby converting it into more spice characteristics and more unique flavor compounds that you'll get from the whiskey. And then lastly, number 4 char. That is the level of extremely thick char that is then basically utilizing fire, direct fire onto the wood to then burn it or leave a layer of charcoal. A number 4 is sometimes also referred to as an alligator char. It is a thick layer. Now, obviously that will impart some more color by doing that, but it also creates that charcoal layer for filtration, which then will basically help extract out some of the less desirable compounds of the whiskey, but then also further develops those lignin decomposition, which then works into flavor compounds imparted back into the bourbon. So all of these together, all of these things you can actually see on our label in the tiny little words that go all the way around here, because the goal is to try and be as transparent about this as possible. The mash bill of 51% corn, 39% rye, 10% malted barley. And in this outer ring, we actually do declare that it is seasoned new medium toast number 4 char. Now, I do know it is Missouri oak. We tasted the differences between Missouri oak and Kentucky oak on this, and we liked the process and the profile a little bit better from Missouri, which is why we opted for that particular barrel character. We also then declared that this was distilled on an all-copper column still and doubler. That is a beer column, and a doubler essentially works for additional reflux and rectification of the spirit, or essentially just lets us get a little bit more kind of tighter cuts on what we want in the character and flavor. So all of those things on this one bottle, and then of course, last but not least, Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, meaning that it is entirely distilled, matured, blended, and bottled in Kentucky. That is our protocol. That is not what putting the name Kentucky on there means, but that's why we put Kentucky on there. Straight, meaning that it is a minimum of 2 years of age. Of course, we know now that it is aged a minimum of 5 years based on that age statement. And then last but not least, we also then state non-chill filtered, some cloudiness may occur. This only goes through a 10 micron sock filter, which is basically only removing barrel sediment. And the reason we do that is because the less that it is filtered, that means the more flavor that is retained. Because it is non-chill filtered, however, that does mean that some of those heavier, almost oily compounds, when it gets cold, may solidify and cloud a little bit, and all you have to do to get it to dissipate is to shake it back up and store it in a warmer environment. Because again, those little cloudy compounds ultimately result in flavor. So there you go, bottle basics. A bit longer than I initially planned, but I think it's all pretty interesting stuff. We'll come back next week with a different video covering more bottle basics. Cheers.